So this is a dual act now. Min and I are here to tell you more about YIMFY, Yes in My Front Yard. You will have heard the mention of YIMFY many times, I think, throughout the course of the conference, but this session is really about telling you more about the ideas behind YIMFY and you know, some of the places that we've been inspired by and our intentions for the future. So we're not going to spend very long at all on you know, convincing you of the need for a centre like this. I'm sure we've spent the last few days doing that. We just wanted to point out to you, we unfortunately used the American spelling of building. So just to say really that YIMFY is about taking what we know and promoting research and really trying to bring more appropriate, natural, sustainable, non-toxic building materials and systems into the mainstream. So it's not just the really passionate kind of owner builders that get to try this stuff. It just to make it much more accessible to the whole range of the construction industry. And it's about both building new and repairing old buildings, because that's a very important part of sustainability as well. And just to start with a definition, really, this is the definition that we've put together about, you know, what do we mean by appropriate building technology. So it means the technology suited to time, place, culture and environment, using local materials to do useful work in ways that do the least possible harm. And actually that definition doesn't include the whole, you know, actually doing good as well, the regeneration side of things. And yeah, so appropriate building technology refers to, it's not going to finish that slide. But basically, I guess that it includes natural building, but it's kind of wider and more than that. So,
we are winging this a little bit, in case you didn't get it. Timber, which is a bio-based material, is widely used and widely tested. It's supported by major industries and there are many building regulations pertaining to its use. But with other materials which don't have that support, some dedication is required to use them, and I know many of you know this. Consequently, their use can be described as being on the fringes still. These graphs illustrate this. They're the results of research I carried out, and I won't go into the detail because I know Graham pretty well explained this, just kind of showing the complete parallel universe, if you like, of oops, damn, I was doing so well. The top, this is the other world, the one out there, and this is our world down here, and you can see the sort of peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs. There's no resemblance to here. Completely different planet that we're talking about. So why is this that it's so difficult to do? Well, regulations rely on scientific knowledge and testing. Regulations are born out of experimentation, and this is where an appropriate building technology centre really comes in. Such a centre could carry out or coordinate research and then feed those working technologies suitable for our conditions back into the New Zealand built environment. An important feature of appropriate building systems is their suitability and popularity amongst owner builders. So many of these systems are labour intensive, even if the material costs are low. As Graham mentioned the other day, 75% of the 144 houses that are represented in that bottom graph were built by their owners. For most of them, it was the ability to be involved in the construction process that made the building and owning of their own home affordable and possible. So having access to really good and relevant information is of great importance to these people. And a YIMFY centre has the potential to really assist owner builders as well as make the whole building systems accessible generally. So therefore, we feel that it's got a major contribution to make towards affordable housing in New Zealand. Although the Building Act in 2004 includes many purposes intended to support sustainability, and despite building controls being performance-based rather than prescriptive, experimental building is still extremely difficult to carry out in this country. There are two mechanisms within the current regulatory system that can allow this to happen. Territorial authorities, we call them TAs to the 20% international audience here, can establish a zone for experimental or demonstration buildings under the Resource Management Act. But this requires the full support of each TA for it to happen. Within the Building Act, there is provision for territorial authorities to grant building consent subject to a waiver or a modification of the New Zealand Building Code. But however, neither of those options is commonly undertaken. They're just too onerous and too expensive. So we do have the mechanisms, but they're convoluted and they're expensive. Despite the regulatory issues, did that move on? Oh, I forgot to do all the clicking along the way. Despite the regulatory issues, the development of appropriate building technologies is already happening at individual sites throughout New Zealand, but there is no single organisation that connects them or acts as a repository of knowledge about the systems being used. In 2010, EBANS expanded its scope to include natural building as a core area of its interest. So in its byline, it now reads, promoting the art and science of earth and natural building. EBANS members have been consulted by TAs, by the Building Research Association of New Zealand, by YIMFY, with regards to consents, guidelines and determinations for buildings using earth, straw and other materials. The committee that formulated the 1998 Earth Building Standards was largely made up of EBANS members. But the most common method of spreading knowledge is through hands-on workshops using earthen materials, straw bale and other natural materials. They run from time to time at different locations, including in Methven, Canterbury right now, out there in the yard. But there is very little in the way of formal training available. Environmental rating schemes like Green Star and the Living Building Challenge encourage the use of building materials with low embodied energy. However, in the absence of a mechanism to rate them, appropriate building materials haven't featured strongly in Green Star rated buildings. The Living Building Challenge takes a stronger position on materials in terms of their toxicity of their ingredients and the distance from material source to building site. Research and experimentation undertaken by an appropriate building technology centre, the YIMFY Centre, could support both these current systems, that's Living Building Challenge and Green Star projects.
Graham, as you probably know, has had a long held dream of creating a New Zealand Centre for Appropriate Building Technology. In 2010, he received a Winston Churchill Fellowship. There was a certain sort of synergy there. And he made a study trip to Europe to investigate existing appropriate technology centres and recorded his findings in his report, Appropriate Building Technology, YIMFY, yes, in my backyard. And then in 2012, there was a permaculture convergence in Tūrangi, and Graham ran a workshop about his ideas for setting up a appropriate building technology centre that I went to, and his ideas meshed so strongly with mine. That's kind of, where YIMFY started really. So just to go back a bit, I visited the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales in 1979 as a young person, and was just so inspired by that whole centre that it motivated my return to New Zealand to study architecture, and then, 20 years later actually was really part of the inspiration for building Earthsong in the first place. And then as part of developing Earthsong, we didn't need all of the land, so we actually subdivided off the front part of the site for future eco-friendly businesses, basically. And it's called Walk to Work, Walk to Work Eco Developments Limited. So that was a real synergy of kind of, me coming back full circle to that idea of actually having a demonstration centre like CAT, a mini one, with Graham's idea of building it. We drew a few more people in, Min Hall, who had spoken at the EBAMS conference and obviously is one of the forerunners of sustainable architecture. We also drew in Alan Drayton, who many of you know, who's BioBuild. He's one of the kind of most established sustainable natural house builders in New Zealand. Amanda Garland, who is an art psychotherapist. You've all met Amanda, and brings that real sense of what do buildings mean to people, and how do we design healthy buildings that matter to us as humans, psychologically and emotionally. And since then, we've also been joined by Craig Ray, who's our kind of techie part of the organisation. And we've set up the YIMFY Trust, a charitable trust in New Zealand, and we're kind of on the way. And as far as Walk to Work goes, it's a very promising fit between what was always planned to happen on the Walk to Work site in terms of eco-friendly businesses and having this educational centre. So we've written a vision document. So our vision is to develop a centre that supports and promotes the use of environmentally restorative building materials and systems. And there's two main areas of focus there. So kind of the first, earliest one is more like a centre, a hub for gathering research, coordinating, networking between people, offering advice and expertise to people wanting that information. The second part of the focus, which is a bit longer term, is actually to build a demonstration centre using those appropriate building technologies where people can come, they can touch and feel and smell and learn and really get a sense for what those technologies are about. So we looked at examples of appropriate building technology centres overseas to see how those ideas would fit here. There's a number of centres overseas, and we're going to kind of run through a little bit about some of them. In Graham's report, one of the things that he did was kind of identified some key factors that one or more of which are present in these educational centres. So some of those centres are a living working site. Some of them are educational primarily, or demonstration sites, or experiment, set up to do experiments, and many of them are, two or three of those, so a mixed site. But it's quite helpful to kind of think about which of those elements each one is really fulfilling. So I'm just going to talk very quickly about CAT. So many of you will be very aware of the Centre for Alternative Technology in Wales. It's, in my experience, it's just one of the most inspiring places to visit, and I think probably in the 40 years that it's been established, millions of people will have gone through CAT and been inspired and learnt, and very powerful kind of learning centre. It was founded in 1973 by Gerard Morgan Grenville on the site of an abandoned slate quarry. And it was conceived initially as an intentional community, early 70s, intentional community, a place to experiment with sustainable living and to be a test bed for new ideas and technologies. Almost immediately there was a conflict between those living there and wanting to live in community and the stresses or the needs to be a demonstration site. So that's been a difficult kind of combination, I think, all the way through. It was partially resolved when the Visitors Centre opened to the public in 1975. And there's still, I think, a small residential community at CAT, but it's no longer part of the general visitor circuit. And to operate, they have 90 permanent and volunteer staff at CAT all year round, and they get about 60,000 visitors per year. So there's large economic spin-offs for the local community, the local economy of the wider community, really. CAT survives economically by offering tertiary educational courses to around 500 students a year, and through its research activities, bookshop and information services. In 2010, they built a purpose-built building for the Wales Institute of Sustainable Education, and the building features 7-metre high curved rammed earth walls, and is attracting even more visitors, as well as being the venue for the institute. And just in terms of CAT's role, it's a mixed one, really. They've got educational, they've got the demonstration, and they're also an experimental site. Very important centre.
The other project that many of you might have been to is the Eden project, another disused quarry, this time in Cornwall. I really don't want to talk about it for too long because I think that we're going to run out of time. But this is very much a public centre, and it's it's not so much, it's educational in a more general way. It showcases appropriate materials in the fabric of the building, and it demonstrates the integration of gardens and agriculture with buildings. Permaculture or livingscapes, as Graham likes to call them. It also demonstrates alternative energy sources, and as I say, it is primarily a demonstration site. Another really important place is FEB, the Building Research Institute at the University of Castle, which was led by Professor Gernot Minke, who people have mentioned before, for about 35 years. Materials were analysed and tested both in the lab and out in the open field over that period. And although the university supported FEB on an operational level, funding for projects came from government grants, EU grants, and from overseas agencies. So FEB's primary roles were educational and experimental, but sadly the work has now ceased. I'll touch on ModCell, but the Building Research Establishment's Centre for Innovative Construction Materials is based at the University of Bath, and so the ModCell or Balehouse project is just one of many things that are analysed and investigated there. So of particular relevance to the idea of a YIMFY centre of this particular place is its partnership with research centres and with industry. Another place that I visited a couple of years ago is a Genesis project at Somerset College near Taunton, and it was established to provide education in sustainable construction. Its Genesis Centre, designed by Archetype, incorporates many appropriate building materials and systems and provides teaching facilities and display spaces for sustainable building materials and services. The project's self-funding via partnerships with industry and the educational programs that it offers. It serves as an information repository for appropriate building materials and systems, and just lost it a little bit there. Excuse me. Just some of the spaces in there. It had, for instance, one room that was sort of a seminar room that was built using 3 different types of earthen materials on the wall. It has a straw bale seminar room and then a sort of timber wing. And it's also got a real hub that you can see in the top image, top left here, of a range of different sort of water heating and PV generation systems that are actually up on the roof. And it showcases some really interesting materials, the sort of the hemp board that was used for a lot of retrofit projects in the UK. Then in the States, we've already touched on DCAT, the Development Centre for Alternative Technology, run by David Eisenberg from Tucson, Arizona, not-for-profit organisation. We've also heard already about the Ecological Building Network, Bruce King's baby in California. And the online Build Well library, which is becoming a really major repository for appropriate technology, provides links to conference papers, research papers, guides, guidelines and codes from all over the world. It is an incredibly important resource, and I think we really take our lead from what Bruce has set up here for our plans for YIMFY, and it's probably like we don't want to double up, but it's really establishing allies.
So what can we learn, from some of those other sites? Well, some of the things we learn that on demonstration sites, basically it's really important what it looks like, that it's very well presented, that it's beautiful, it's what people interact with, touch, feel, etc. So the standard of presentation is critical. With the educational and experimental sites, they often have links to other agencies like universities or funding bodies or industry, and that's not visible necessarily on the surface, but it can have a real impact. Basically, as soon as you get funding, then it usually comes with strings attached, and there's some loss of control, really, of the centre because of that. And there's other aspects that we can learn, that a thriving centre can generate large localised spin-offs, benefits for the wider community. Any appropriate technology centre must be integrated with all of the other adjacent and satellite centres where things are happening. So around New Zealand there's lots of things happening in isolated sites, and it's important to link those up. It is important to have those other sites where research and innovation can happen out of the public eye. So you can make your mistakes, your first mistakes out of the public eye before they become public. In both CAT and the Eden project, there are permaculture gardens along with the built environment, and that for a demonstration site, that is a major drawcard and important part of the holistic nature of the concept. A key role for most of the centres is the repository of knowledge and skills to facilitate this ongoing integration of appropriate building technology. And obviously these days there's got to be a web-based component. That's one of the key areas of storing the knowledge and information is on the net, where it's accessible to everybody. So from this we've drawn up a list of requirements for the YIMFY Centre, and we want to be, a number of those things. So the key elements, I guess, for us are exemplary design elements, key personnel, and a sound business model. And those are the real keys. So we've had a look at what are the key areas of work that we need to work on. And there's a lot of them there, but just picking out the four most important ones. We want to design and build a display centre using appropriate building technologies. We want to link and coordinate and generate research. So research is really important. And YIMFY is about kind of linking what is already going on, but also generating new research and appropriate building methods throughout New Zealand and making that information available. We feel it's important to provide expertise, when it's needed by owner builders or by anyone in the whole wider construction industry. And a key part of the work is working to get appropriate building materials accepted for the New Zealand Building Code. So doing some of that groundwork so it gets code compliance, which makes it so much easier for others to start using those systems.
I'll just quickly go through this, but a couple of years ago when we first came up with this idea, I decided that we'd run a 6-week studio project with third-year Bachelor of Architecture students at Unitec looking at this walk-to-work site. And we began with a day-long workshop with the walk-to-work trustees and came up with a brief. And then the students set about the project. In hindsight, we probably made the brief just a little bit too complex, but just the way Unitec was running at the time too, we didn't have the opportunity for a 12-week project, which was really what's required to do justice to the scheme. This is the brief here, and all this information, that we'll post this talk up so that you can, it really gives much more of an idea of what we're on about. But here's just some of the examples of the work that the students produced. And it ranged from, we actually began with an earth building day with Alan Drayton, which many of those students said to me was the absolute best day that they'd had in Unitec in 3 years. So I think they really, really enjoyed getting muddy. Here's some more examples. So, the YIMFY Trust, what next? Establish a business plan. We still haven't really done that. We've spent a lot of energy establishing what kind of organisation we are, and the idea of to actually get the trust established was quite a lot of work. We really want to keep building the website that is already up and running, and to really populate that, because there actually is a lot of New Zealand information out there, but it's just everywhere, and so we really want to try and pull it into one place. But that's a big job, and so we really need, a major thing for us is to get that business plan established, to put ourselves in a position that we can seek funding, and the idea of if we could have one person who could be maybe like in a 3-day-a-week job, something like that, we would be able to pull all these resources together to be in a sort of format that was available on the internet for everybody to use. So that's kind of really where we're at. You can see down under present,